Okay, so what I'm gonna do essentially is I'm gonna play music, and I'm not gonna live stream it. I might do that tomorrow, but I'm essentially gonna like have you watch me do this because even though I think it's gonna be boring as crap, uh, try not to curse here so anyone can watch this. Um, I really want to be transparent in how I'm doing this. So I started building out pieces of it, and I don't know how it's going to work. But I'm going to listen to music, and then I'll try and like talk through some of it, but it might just be quiet. So I might have to put some music in the background. So I'm going to start some music right now, and now I'm just gonna like I'll try and like keep you up to date with what I'm doing, but really I just need to kind of think it through, get in a flow state. So I'm gonna work on open positions right now. So essentially it says when the user lands on the open position, I'm creating this for employers, by the way. They're able to click a button to create a new position. When they click that button, a modal opens up that allows them to input a job description in a text field. The text field should have the ability to input rich formatting that allows them to take it from one. I put rich text formatting on purpose because if it doesn't, it'll look weird when they like upload it and then look at it. And then the second reason is because usually when someone's copying and pasting, they're copying the job description from somewhere else, and usually that has rich text formatting. In order to help them copy it and paste it in a way that actually looks good, you usually just automatically just want to say like, "Hey, just build it with rich text formatting." And hope that it works. A lot of things that you'll see that I do, I'm really hoping that Bolt can figure it out because it has so far, and I've tested it in a lot of different ways. And actually, this application itself is going to be a test of what it can actually pull off because I'm not sure it can do what I want it to do, but might as well try it. So, and then it says when the user is finished, there's a button at the bottom that says save the position. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you something that I knew that I wanted to do in here, and that is essentially I want them to be able to open a text field, right? But also, as you guys saw with the job creation prompt video, where we're going to use OpenAI, I also want there to be another button. So I'm actually going to say when they click a button, a modal opens up that gives them the option to text a job to input an option to paste a job description. No. I'm just gonna keep this. I'm just gonna keep this. I'm not sure I want them to job create quite yet. So when they click the button, it allows opens up and it allows them to input a job. Okay, so save position. Okay. All right, I'm turning on music now. Let's. I really don't think this is going to work very well, but we're going to see. Let's see how much time has passed. I've wasted basically 3 minutes of your life. Sorry. This is weird for me. Let's get a good song going on. Here we go. Fried Rice by Boss and JID or JID. Okay. So I found out that if you don't tell it that things need to persist, it won't keep them in a state from when people switch from page to page or log in, log out. So, um, shows that all this that saved need to persist when the user um, clicks on another logs out of the application. So this sentence right here will automatically mean that it's going to do a super base integration, which is native to Bolt. So that's why we use Superbase because I can't code and I don't want to figure out Firebase and MongoDB and all these other things. I know Airtable pretty well, but since it's natively integrated with Superbase, I'm just gonna go ahead. I can't hear myself talk, by the way. Music's loud. Um, okay, so this sentence by itself will automatically trigger a Superbase integration. Um, but you have to have it if you want this to be a real application and something that you can sell. Okay, let's pause it real quick. Let me get a little bit ahead. Okay, I just realized that probably need to like frame out what the positions look like, right? Um, so let's do the receives cards of all of their open positions on interviews. Oh, how many candidates need a how many candidates for this role? This right here, that's the last sentence, was essentially to give it the context that is more often than not that a user is going to have to have more than one um, uh, open positions, but also more than one candidate might be in more than one open position. So it'll have kind of like a database schema that allows for a candidate to be in multiple places, but a position is only in one place. So that's what that sentence is going to help you do. One position. And down here, also gonna put next to the candidates' names. Uh, Here, actually, let's go ahead. Sometimes I know I'm gonna say something in the future, so I'll put it down a little bit. And I'll say next to the candidate's name, because I know this is gonna be a feature that I'm gonna need to map up to here to close this loop. Should have the positions that they are the workflow of, but it should only contain the number when the user hovers over the number, the and overlay appears, which shows the user which jobs the candidate is currently. It's going to sound weird, but again, you can use natural language processing for this. It'll know. And then if you really have trouble, just run this through ChatGPT and just say, clean it up for me so that it makes more sense to you. Okay. By the way, I'm pausing it back and forth because you don't want to see the thinking time. You'll see that when I live stream it. But I have to think a lot to like process through everything so we can, get this right. And it's kind of boring. All right, so I took some extra time to think. So I think what I'm going to do is like have it took me about like 15 minutes to be honest. I think what is going to happen is that I'm going to have I want them to I want them to have some type of readout as to maybe not when they get maybe not when they get a reference, but it might have something like when a user clicks into a card of the open positions, a modal pops up that shows them so you already have the amount of candidates, right? But it'll show them the names of the candidates in the pipeline and where they are on getting references. In order to show where they are, use a like a progress meter that indicates how many references they have received. And you'll see why that's going to be important because down here where it says references, um, it'll have something like um, for every reference that is received, match the candidate ID to the candidate ID that the reference gives to the um, I don't know what I want to call them, the reviewer. To the reviewer. The reviewer is an AI is answering the call when a reference gets off the call. The transcription of the call is given to the application and attached to the candidate ID. So this means that for the um, reference checks, that means that this prompt here is going to need to be really special, because that means that we're going to have to essentially tell the agent that there's a candidate ID, right? Because it's not a real person. It's going to be an AI agent. So we're going to need them to essentially say the first question that is out of their mouth has to be, what is the candidate ID? That's just going to have to be what happens. Um, so that will help. So then up here, it should say, give each candidate a candidate ID. This is how they will be identified in the system, and how references will be attached to the candidate. So in fact, when the user lands on the candidate page, they should see the candidate ID first on a row, then to the right, the candidate's first name, last name, email, the job, the positions they are applying to. Okay, let's pause there for a second so I can think a little bit more. So essentially, in a different video, I said that there's a concept that I call closing the loop. So you see me now work on 3 different features to tie them all together to make sure that again, when you're talking to Bolt, when you're talking to I mean, I'm just really familiar with Bolt. You have to understand that it is not a genius. It can't read your mind. So you have to make sure that you're closing loops, and it'll still get these loops wrong, but it really helps it if you're able to outline how these different pages and features connect to one another, so that as it's coding, and also you'll see when I go through my formula later, uh, as you're telling it to update things and change things, it really helps if it knows like how these things are interlinked, so that, for instance, if I'm saying that this candidate ID is going to be uh, right, so include a modal pop-up that shows the name of the candidates. Okay, if I know that the candidate ID is going to be important in the candidates here, and the references here, that means that also it's probably going to be really important for when the for when the employer is sending out the references, when they're sending out the emails and they're saying, hey, like, so and so listed you as a reference. Can you call this number? And here's their candidate ID. To have that email populate it really is going to be helpful to have a candidate ID. Also, there's no other way to accurately get the AI agent, because I've used it in a couple of ways, to identify what the person is calling about, because usually it's pretty open ended. And so, when it's a human person, someone can say, I'm calling on behalf of so and so, or they'll look at the number and they'll match the number to the reference sheet, or they'll schedule a call with the reference. We want this to be completely hands off for the people who are doing the references, the employers. And so, in order to do that, we need it to be inbound, not a scheduling thing, which also makes the experience better for the references because they can just call in, right? So they can call in to get a reference at any point in time, 24/7. They can call a number and give a reference and have a little conversation. And so that creates a more asynchronous way of doing references on that side. On the employer side, it makes it a little bit cleaner. And on the candidate side, it allows them to get more references in, and be evaluated fairly, right? So that's kind of why we have to do a candidate ID, because we really need to make sure that if we're going to make this all work in the way that it needs to work, you have to be very specific about, hey, how AI will work and how it won't work. And how it won't work is if you're doing all inbound where someone calls a phone number, you can't have them fill in a form that actually lets you know what candidate they're talking about. So it'll be easier to just have a candidate ID. And that way, when the AI asks, they'll say, hey, what candidate ID? What's a candidate ID and the first and last name of the candidate? Well, those are three identifying factors that allow you to start to piecemeal together so that when we give the report back to the employer from the conversation, we can use those three different data points to be able to kind of triangulate what a candidate is. So even if the employer doesn't get the candidate, or even if the reference doesn't get the candidate ID completely right, but they get the first name and the last name right, we can kind of like surmise, like even if an employer has, they're not going to have more than probably 15 to 25 of these for each open position. And so we know that it's unlikely that someone will have a similar sounding candidate ID and a similar sounding first name and last name, all three together. So you kind of create a fingerprint in this process, and even a large corporation isn't going to have more than like 20 to 25 reference checks, right? So that's kind of what we're doing here is we're setting the stage for this application to actually understand what we're trying to go for, so that when we use AI for the voice side of things, we're giving it parameters that it can be comfortable with. But it all starts with making sure that we're prepping our database schema to be able to accept this type of information. And it starts with like understanding that it needs a candidate ID. So that's a long-winded way to explain it, but it really needs to be long-winded in order for you to do this. I'm not going to say it's right, because there's many ways to skin this cat. But we're saying, like, if you're really trying to do this for real and you're really trying to build products and turn them into companies and sell them to customers, and this might have an enterprise license at some point, which it won't right now because it needs single sign-on and a lot of other like SOC 2 security. It's not ready for that yet. But if I was going to sell it to like a couple of friends, like sure, I can go with a one-shot app. But if I'm trying to sell it to people that I don't know and just say, hey, we'll give you this for free, just test it out on 10 candidates, see what you like about it, see what you don't like about it, we'll iterate based on that. It has to be like functional. It has to be somewhat intuitive enough to get them to try twice so that we can keep iterating together, and then hopefully they'll pay for it at the end of the day. So that is why it has to be this intensive. That's why it has to be this long-winded. That's why I'm probably going to do one or two more videos that have nothing to do with Bolt yet, because it really requires this level of effort to be able to get this to a place. And you'll see why when I start Bolt. Because if you've tried Bolt before and you haven't done it this way, you'll see why when I start doing it in like the next two or three videos, you'll be like, oh, I get it. This is so much easier the way that he does it. But all it takes is just a little bit of planning and a little bit of thought, so that you can, kind of build this thing together, and then it'll help you build a lot faster in the afters. So I'm going to stop there because it's been 10 minutes. I don't want to do these too long. It's over 10 minutes unless I'm live streaming. But hopefully that's all helpful. Again, I know it's long-winded. I'm sorry. It's just kind of what's required. I don't know what else to say about it. Sorry.